Chapter 454 Awakening, realizing. Cool sensations suddenly coursed over his body amidst all that pain, and these sensations gradually extinguished the flames of agony within him. That refreshing feeling was exceptionally comfortable, and Huo Yuao's nerves gradually relaxed in his deep slumber. In his dream, Donga had returned to his side and was leaning down next to him. He could smell her faint fragrance as he was holding her petite hand, and he could feel his heart calming down completely. All the torturous pain and agony that he had sustained in the past were nothing with Donga around, and everything was no longer painful as long as she was back. At least, there was a crisp sweetness after the bitterness. The first ray of sunlight seeped into the tent in the next morning and shone right on Tang Wutong's face. She wanted to raise her hand subconsciously to shade herself from the sunlight, but she realized that her hand felt a little heavy. Tang Wutong opened her eyes. Her large and pinkish blue eyes were still a little blurry and sleepy, and the first thing she saw was a pale but slightly rosy cheek. The blurriness in her eyes immediately vanished as her big beautiful eyes widened in an instant. Everything went blank in her mind. Where am I? Why is there someone sleeping next to me? She nearly kicked out, but she had a deep impression of this side profile that she was staring at, and she understood that this person couldn't be harmed. Tang Wutong forced herself to calm down and composed herself before she took a serious look at this person. It's him. Huo Yuao. Tang Wutong's memory from the previous night finally returned. She thought to herself, to her apparent surprise, I fell asleep next to him, and I slept here for the entire night, even though this fellow is still unconscious. But I slept with him for the entire night. Tang Wutong glanced down at her hand. She was astonished as she discovered that all of the fingers on her right hand were tightly interlocked with Huo Yuao's right hand, as if that was how it was supposed to be. That can't be. What are you doing, Tang Wutong? Tang Wutong sat up, embarrassed, as she swiftly pulled her hand back. She blushed from the embarrassment. He's still unconscious, and it's evident that he wasn't the one who reached over to grab me. Does this mean that not only did I sleep next to him, but I also decided to hold his hand? That is just unbelievable. Tang Wutong placed her hands against her cheeks, which were burning up. She didn't dare to look at Huo Yuao. Suddenly, footsteps could be heard outside the tent. Tang Wutong bounced to her feet as if she had been shocked. She stood beside the bed as she circulated her soul power so that she could calm herself down. The curtain was lifted as Shu Sanqi and Zhang Nanan walked in from outside. They looked at Tang Wutong, who was standing beside the bed, and Zhang Nanan couldn't help but laugh at her as she said, Wutong, even if you're taking care of Huo Yuao, you don't have to keep standing up. How is he? Has anything changed? Tang Wutong's back was facing them as she nodded and said, he's doing well. Everything's normal. Shu Sanqi and Zhang Nanan came beside the bed. Shu Sanqi glanced at Tang Wutong and caught her embarrassed and blushed expression. From his perspective, she was clearly still feeling embarrassed about cleaning up Huo Yuao during the previous night. He couldn't help but laugh inside, but he didn't expose her. Hey, Yuao's complexion seems a lot better than before. Look, there's traces of rosiness on his face. Zhang Nanan said elatedly. Wasn't that right? Shu Sanqi looked down and could tell that Huo Yuao's face was much rosier than the past few days, while his breathing was evidently a lot thicker and more stable. Wutong, you take the best care of him. Seems like he'll recover very quickly. Shu Sanqi praised her. Yes, I hope he will recover as soon as possible. Tang Wutong answered subconsciously. Zhang Nanan said, Wutong, you must be tired after taking care of him for the entire night. You should go back and rest. Sanqi and I will take turns to look after him today, in the day. Oh, okay. Tang Wutong nodded in their direction before she hurriedly stepped out. She raced into her own tent after exiting Huo Yuao's tent. Zhang Nanan glanced at the tent's curtain, which was still swaying a little. She muttered confusedly, hey, why does she seem like she's escaping from something? Shu Sanqi chuckled and said, who knows? In the end, Yuao is in such bad shape, and he can't do anything bad to her even if he wanted to. Nothing could have happened. Zhang Nanan blushed as she glared at him and said, only you would think about doing bad things every day. Shu Sanqi grabbed her around her slim waist and said, did you not say last night that bad things actually feel quite good? PSH. You're such an asshole. How can you say such things? If you keep going, stay away from me next time. Zhang Nanan retorted angrily as she blushed even more. All right, I'll stop talking. Shu Sanqi apologized again and again. His eyes suddenly widened as he spoke. That was because he suddenly noticed that the corner of Huo Yuao's mouth actually curved upward a little, as if he was smiling. Huo Yuao recovered very quickly indeed, and he finally awakened from his deep slumber that same afternoon. Even though his body was still very weak, his mind was clear and awake, and that undoubtedly meant he was starting towards a path to speedy recovery. Shu Sanqi was taking care of Huo Yuao in the afternoon. He had just fed Huo Yuao some water before he lowered his voice and said menacingly, you little rascal, did you hear something you were not supposed to hear this morning? Huo Yuao couldn't help laugh as he said, no, I didn't hear anything at all. Really? Shu Sanqi stared at him suspiciously. But why did I feel like you were smiling this morning? Huo Yuao rolled his eyes and said, third senior brother, you must have a guilty conscience. What have you done this time? PSH. I am righteous and honest. Why would I have a guilty conscience? Right, Yuao, let's not talk about that. Our mission can be considered successfully completed. We have helped the Daluo Empire regain the Ningdong mountain range, which they can use to directly threaten the Sun Moon Empire's own territory. We have fulfilled our strategic aim. Should we go back once you've recovered? Huo Yuao answered, yes, it's about time to go back. We don't yet know what the situation is like with the Heavenly Soul Empire. If the Heavenly Soul Empire is completely conquered, the Sun Moon Empire will directly threaten the academy. We should return to the academy as quickly as possible once I'm a little better. Shu Sanqi said, all right then, doesn't seem like we have another choice. Right, the Daluo Empire has ordered us to be rewarded for our merit in battle, and many rewards have been bestowed upon us. We have accepted all the monetary rewards, but we declined offers of noble titles. Your title is a hereditary marquis. What do you plan to do with that? Huo Yuao sighed and said, forget about the rest. This title of hereditary marquis is useful to me, so I want that. How is the situation on the front lines? Shu Sanqi said, the Daluo Empire is garrisoned in the Ningdong mountain range after taking it back. They have sent several dozen small teams of soul masters to wreak havoc in the Sun Moon Empire. This is meant to attract the Sun Moon Empire's attention, but we have no idea what this measure will achieve. We no longer participated in their military operations after that day. Huo Yuao said, that's all right. I trust that the White Tiger Duke won't make the same mistake with his eye for war strategies. The Daluo Empire's elites are all here, and the Sun Moon Empire has to put in a lot of effort even if they deploy their large armies to attack the Ningdong mountain range to retake it. Furthermore, their main forces are all concentrated in Heavenly Soul Empire. Shu Sanqi laughed bitterly. I think the Daluo Empire won't be that much of a threat to the Sun Moon Empire. The death god Douluo is too terrifying. With her around, it will be very difficult to deal real damage to the Sun Moon Empire. A lamenting and frustrated look appeared in Huo Yuao's eyes. How could he not be aware of what Shu Sanqi had just told him? The death god Douluo, Yi Shishui, was an ultimate Douluo, and she possessed the powerful bloody demon puppet as her martial soul. She was his teacher's old lover, and the senior was simply too powerful. Huo Yuao could still remember that his teacher once said it was difficult for evil soul masters to become titled Douluo, but if one such evil soul master eventually did become a titled Douluo, then there would be a calamity. The Holy Ghost Church had been hiding away for so many years, and their strength had finally matured. They possessed evil soul masters who were also titled Douluo, and they even had an evil soul master who was an ultimate Douluo. She possessed the death god Pagoda, which had probably become a class 10 soul tool. Yi Shishui was almost invincible in the human world, and she was directly involved in this war. The beast god Tian had scared her away this time, but what about the next time? A single individual's strength might not be able to change the outcome of a war, but a person with terrifying power such as hers was sufficient to turn the tides of battle. Furthermore, the Holy Ghost Church still had the Darkness Holy Dragon, Long Xiaya, who was yet another ultimate Douluo. The only two remaining ultimate Douluo in the world were both aiding the Sun Moon Empire. This was terribly disadvantageous for the Douluo continent's three native empires. The balance of this war had completely swung in favor of the Sun Moon Empire. The Daluo Empire had regained the Ningdong mountain range, but what about the future? What would the future bring? The Sun Moon Empire's main forces were concentrated in the Heavenly Soul Empire, but the death god Douluo was anchoring things down in the Sun Moon Empire, and it was hard to say how many of the Daluo Empire's soldiers and soul masters would be annihilated. What was even more frightening was the fact that Yi Shishui was an evil soul master, and everyone could tell from the mental state that she had displayed the other day that her mind wasn't stable at all. Such a person wouldn't care about the deaths of normal citizens, and there was nothing at all that could threaten her. My strength is far from enough. If I can also become a title Douluo, and perhaps even a transcendent Douluo, I might have a chance to stop her. But becoming a title Douluo is so difficult. Huro Yuao said nothing, and Shu Sanchi said, I have already sent the news back, and I have reported the death god Douluo, Yu Shishui's existence to the various elders of the Sea God's Pavilion. I think it won't be long before the Academy might throw themselves into the war after all. Otherwise, the Sun Moon Empire will be unstoppable. Yes, Huro Yuao returned from his contemplation and said, we should go back as quickly as possible. The Douluo Empire isn't being aggressively pressured by the Sun Moon Empire on this side after all, and they can stabilize themselves for the time being. However, the Heavenly Soul Empire is probably in deep trouble. With the death god Douluo around, I don't think the Douluo Empire can be that effective even if they push into the Sun Moon Empire's territory. The Academy probably has to make other plans. Shu Sanchi said, all right, you don't have to worry about so much. Your recovery is most important. Stop talking and take a rest. All right. Huro Yuao shut his eyes once more and quietly felt the changes in his body. Huro Yuao's body had almost exploded from the pressure after he overused the beast god, DT and strength, but all that wasn't without benefit. The beast god was controlling him back then, but Huro Yuao's consciousness was still very much awake. Therefore, he could entirely feel how frighteningly powerful the beast god's power was. That was what it felt like to be an ultimate Douluo. This experience undoubtedly allowed Huro Yuao to feel the aura of a top-tier individual before he had attained the necessary power and cultivation. Huro Yuao could even feel that the beast god had infused about 80% of his true body's soul power into him. Huro Yuao's passageways were all saturated when that happened, and his tremendous life energy couldn't keep up with the terrifyingly destructive power. This was the case even after the reverse scale that the beast god had given him bore the brunt of the pressure. This part of his memory was very vivid and deep for him. He realized back then that DTN's soul power was different from his. Huro Yuao was a soul sage, and his soul power was like sticky liquid that circulated as and how he wanted. His soul power's density, purity, regenerative effects, and sustainability were all relatively good. However, DTN's soul power was like tiny black holes connected together, and every black hole contained frightening spatial power, while each unique space contained unimaginably terrifying strength. Everything was within DTN's control. Huro Yuao had thought to himself back then, is that the power of an ultimate Douluo? It was very difficult for the human body to contain such terrifying and extraordinary soul power, and humans would have to rely on spatial power to contain their soul power. Furthermore, that spatial power had to take effect within one's own body. Everything was just so strange and mystical. DTN mentioned spatial power when he was battling Yu Shishui, and it was evident that she wasn't as good with spatial power as DTN was. They were both some of the most powerful individuals in the world, but there was still quite a gap between them. Huro Yuao could feel that if DTN's true body was present, Yu Shishui would still ultimately be no match for DTN even if she leveraged the Death Pagoda. DTN wasn't known as the most powerful individual in the world for no reason. Huro Yuao had told his four spirits that his future aim was to challenge the beast god and ultimately defeat him before he would attempt to sense the call from the god realm. Huro Yuao realized after his experience that he still had a long way to go. He was just too far away in comparison to the most powerful individuals in the world. Huro Yuao was rare prodigy. However, which individual who could become a title Douluo wasn't a prodigy? Yi Shishui, Mu En, and Long Xiaoyao were all the most talented individuals of their generation. Huro Yuao still had a long way to go if he wanted to catch up with them, much less surpass them. DTN's power replayed in his mind. Huro Yuao didn't feel discouraged because of it. Instead, an intense desire was ignited in his heart, the desire to become more powerful, to become stronger. Furthermore, for some reason, he realized after he had passed out twice that his spiritual state would improve every time he came to. During both times when he was unconscious, he felt as if Donga had returned to his side, and that sensation felt extremely real. If it can be like that every time I pass out, then I don't mind even if I have to pass out every day. Huro Yuao continued to think as the corners of his mouth curled into a faint smile. He channeled his spiritual power and looked inward at his current state. The passageways in his body were reconnected, and dense life energy flourished through them, while his blood was flowing very smoothly. His soul power began to recover by itself after his passageways healed, and that was the strength of his body. DTN's strength wasn't something that just anyone could take. He had used his body as a foundation in battle, and even if another title Douluo was in his place, he or she probably wouldn't be in as good a shape as Huro Yuao was. Even a title Douluo could explode from all the pressure, let alone a soul sage like Huro Yuao. Huro Yuao's reconnected passageways had become green from all that life energy nourishing them. There was no question that more of that tremendous life energy originated from his life guardian blade than his own veins. The life guardian blade had evolved completely after it consumed a life gold. It was a small carving knife at the start, but it had evolved into a dagger. It was nourished continuously within Huro Yuao's body, and even DTN couldn't feel its existence. DTN had used his own strength to protect Huro Yuao's organs when his body was severely hurt. Damaged passageways weren't much, and the power in Huro Yuao's veins was enough for his passageways to recover by themselves. However, Huro Yuao would be in deep trouble if his organs had erupted. What DTN didn't know was that the power of Huro Yuao's life guardian blade was unleashed once more when it was guided by the immortal Dr. Douluo's life energy. That pure life energy had baptized Huro Yuao's body once more. Its effects this time were almost the same as when Huro Yuao had first fused with it. His damaged passageways contained even more life energy. His healed passageways became tougher, and were filled with even more life energy. If this state continued, Huro Yuao felt that he could return to normal after just 3 more days at the most. The experience of fighting against the death god was exceptionally precious for him. At the same time, he understood that the protection that the beast god's reverse scale conferred to him wasn't absolute. He was lucky this time. If Yu Shishui hadn't been overly sensitive, he probably would have been in deep trouble, just as he would be if he was faced with an individual as powerful as an ultimate Douluo. Even if he was faced with a normal title Douluo, his body would be severely injured from the burden it would have to take even if the beast god defeated the title Douluo for him. Thinking about everything in hindsight was scary, but all this wasn't a bad thing for Huro Yuao, because at least he was able to judge how much strength the beast god could channel into his body, and how much his body could take. This would be very beneficial for his attempts to utilize the beast god's power in the future. The beast god didn't just do bad things after he had bestowed the reverse scale upon him. He finally did something good. However, Huro Yuao still reminded himself constantly that he wouldn't draw upon the beast god's power if he could afford it. Otherwise, he would develop a reliance on it, and that would hinder his future improvements and cultivation. Soul power continued circulating within his body. Huro Yuao used his spiritual power to control a small part of his soul power before he circulated it in his dantian. Huro Yuao recounted again and again how it was like when the beast god had channeled soul power into his body. If he could create a black hole like that, would his cultivation improve more quickly? Even if his cultivation didn't improve, what would it be like for his explosiveness in battle? Huro Yuao began to circulate that thread of soul power in his dantian as he contemplated. He whirled and compressed it. This seemed like where the beast god's secret lay, except utilizing spatial power was still a mystery for him. This thread of soul power wasn't that powerful, but it began to whirl increasingly quickly as Huro Yuao deliberately controlled it with his spiritual power. This soul power was gradually compressed. From the beginning, it was like a fist, but it was gradually compressed into the size of a chicken egg, and then a hawthorn. Huro Yuao could clearly feel that his liquid soul power felt like it was going to solidify after it had reached that level. Its rotation speed began to slow down due to the compression process. What's happening? Is my method wrong? But DTN's soul power was clearly formed by small black holes that were rotating at high speed. Every black hole contained spatial power and immense soul power. Is there something wrong with how I'm compressing the soul power? Huro Yuao infused even more spiritual power as he contemplated, and forced that soul power to continue rotating more quickly. However, he was careful not to compress it anymore. Huro Yuao could gradually feel that something wasn't right. This thread of soul power was rotating even more quickly from his full effort, but solid grains began to appear in it. Those grains began to absorb the rest of the soul power inside his dantian as they rotated so that they could strengthen themselves. Those whirlpools that had been compressed to the size of hawthorns began to enlarge once more. No. Huo Yuao immediately sensed that something wasn't right. He instantly increased his control over his spiritual power so that he could make the whirlpools rotate slower. That was him. If another soul sage was in his place, that person couldn't possibly have extra spiritual power after adjusting his or her control over their soul power time and time again. The soul power's rotation speed slowed, and its absorption of external soul power naturally weakened. Its volume stopped increasing, but the solidified soul power also began to slowly melt and become liquid once more. Finally, the thread of soul power returned to normal under Huo Yuao's careful control, and returned all the soul power in his dantian. It continued circulating according to the mysterious heaven techniques cultivation pathways. Huo Yuao was utterly confused after his experiment. He couldn't possibly ask the beast god, as Tian would be extremely happy that his soul power was increasing more slowly. How could Tian possibly tell him such a secret? However, the way Tian was circulating his own soul power left a deep impression in Huo Yuao's mind, and he could faintly feel that this way of circulating soul power was a method that he would ultimately reach. Doing experiments on his body here was far too dangerous. A single misstep would be equivalent to creating a bomb in his body. Huo Yuao decided that, after his body had recovered, he would channel his soul power out of his body and control it outside. That should be no problem with his spiritual power. At the very least, he had to figure out the secret of how soul power and spatial power fused together. He would have to ask Elderson for the rest after he returned to the academy. Even though Elderson wasn't an ultimate Douluo, he was still a rank 98 transcendent Douluo after all, so he should also be working in the same direction. His body was getting better by the second, and his passageways were repairing themselves continuously. Huo Yuao could get out of bed himself by nightfall. However, he didn't get to eat much for dinner due to his physical state. He ate a large bowl of nourishing meat soup and some noodles that were cooked until they were very soft. Everyone from Shrek who was sitting in the canteen glanced at Huo Yuao again and again. What a miracle. What was happening to Huo Yuao's body was simply a miracle. He was someone whose passageways were almost completely shattered. Not only did he not die, but it had only been 3 or 4 days, and he could already get up and walk. What was that if not a miracle? They would have inferred that he had an undying body if they hadn't known him so well. Shu Sanchi stared at Huo Yuao's pale expression and said, Yuao, who are you going to assign to take care of you tonight? Yi Guyi and Nan Qikai blushed when they heard his words. Tang Wutong was drinking her soup, and her spoon quivered faintly as she spilled some soup back into her bowl. Huo Yuao smiled and said, there's no need. We are inside the Northwestern Field Army's main camp, and we are very safe. I can move around by myself too, so I don't need someone to take care of me. Thank you, everyone, for the past few days, and I know I've also worried you. My body will completely recover after 2 more days, and then we can return to the academy. Yi Guyi and Nan Qikai seemed a little dejected when they heard him say that he didn't need anyone to take care of him, because that meant that they no longer had any chances to be close to him. Tang Wutong heaved a deep sigh of relief. She didn't even take a single glance at Huo Yuao throughout dinner. Every time she thought about wiping and cleaning Huo Yuao the previous night, she would be uncontrollably embarrassed. She couldn't even regret it. Why did I help him do something like that the other night? That's just unbelievable. Shu Sanchi glanced at all 3 ladies, and a strange smile appeared on his face. All right, then you have to be careful tonight. Right, Wutong is very near you, and you can call her if you feel that something is wrong with your body. She should be able to hurry over as soon as possible, right, Wutong? Ah. Tang Wutong raised her head and looked at Shu Sanchi, and then at Huo Yuao. Her expression was clearly a little rigid as she nodded. Huo Yuao thought she wasn't very willing as he watched her expression and hurriedly said, it's all right, Wutong. I don't think I'll have to trouble you. Yes, Tang Wutong acknowledged before she lowered her head once more. Everyone returned to their tents to rest after dinner. The Northwestern Field Army's camp was very empty at this moment, as most of the army had already been deployed into the Ningdo mountain range. The White Tiger Duke and Princess Juju had to direct everything over there, so they weren't around either. Huo Yuao's body felt a lot better as he crossed his legs and sat on his bed. His passageways had reconnected completely, and the next thing he had to do was get used to his new passageways. At the same time, he had to let his passageways consolidate and strengthen themselves with nourishment from his life energy. They should be able to recover completely by then. Life gold is truly a mystical existence. Huo Yuao controlled the Life Guardian blade with his mind as green light flickered, and it suddenly appeared in front of him and hovered in the air. Point down. The room was a little dim, but the dagger's appearance instantly tainted everything with green hues. Green light weaved around the room as dense life energy rippled. Huo Yuao waved his hand, and the dagger ended up in his grip. The blade wasn't very long, about 7 inches, and the grip was about 4 inches long. The Life Guardian blade could only be considered a small dagger. However, Huo Yuao immediately felt a thick wave of life energy fill his body as he gripped the dagger, and everything in his body shone with green colors. He leapt down from his bed and removed a tough piece of metal from his storage ring. Huo Yuao swung the dagger in his hand, and green light flashed over the metal before it vanished into thin air just like that, as if it had never existed. A beam of light flashed on the Life Guardian blade, and it didn't change much, but Huo Yuao could feel that it now contained some life energy inside that didn't belong to it. Huo Yuao used his mind once more, and the golden dragon spear flew out from his eye of destiny. The Life Guardian blade pressed against the golden dragon spear, and the golden dragon spear flickered and absorbed that life energy that belonged to some other object. Something occurred to Huo Yuao, just as Wang Qiu had said before. The Life Guardian blade and the golden dragon spear were clearly complementary to each other. Life energy absorbed by the golden dragon spear could sustain the Life Guardian blade, while life energy absorbed by the Life Guardian blade from objects could be used to replenish the golden dragon spear. If these 2 items could be completely fused together, then their strengths would be improved. Perhaps their strengths would even be increased to a frightening level. The Life Guardian blade belonged to him, while the golden dragon spear belonged to Wang Qiu, so he couldn't attempt something like this before. Furthermore, the Life Guardian blade was just a small carving knife back then, and its volume was too small. But now, the blade's bulk had increased, and both items belonged to Huo Yuao. Could he attempt this now? Huo Yuao pinched the golden dragon spear's tip as he contemplated, before he pressed it against the Life Guardian blade's grip. The Life Guardian blade shone with faint green light, while the golden dragon spear radiated faint ripples of golden light. Those lights intertwined and fused with each other. I can't just tie them together, can I? A simple connection like that cannot unleash their potential as contemporary to each other. What do I have to do for this to work? Huo Yuao was stuck. He could sense that his choice was right, but how he should fuse them together was another tough question. Huo Yuao frowned as he descended into deep thought. The Life Guardian blade radiated tremendous life energy, while the golden dragon spear seemed a lot more reserved. There seemed to be golden light flowing inside the golden dragon spear's deep golden hue. Perhaps that was because it had tasted the blood of many, and the spear itself effused a somber and desolate aura. Both items had the same characteristic of absorbing life energy, but they were different in that the Life Guardian blade absorbed life energy from objects and converted it into life energy that humans or animals needed, while the golden dragon spear did the opposite. How could these 2 be fused together? Huo Yuao continued contemplating as he pressed both items together, and he deeply felt their transformations as they were pressed against each other. Huo Yuao quickly discovered that neither changed too much when they were pressed together. They didn't reject each other, but they didn't attract each other either. They seemed like 2 distinct objects that couldn't be simpler, and nothing much happened when they were pressed together. Huo Yuao took out another piece of metal. He allowed the Life Guardian blade to absorb its life energy. Yes, something began to change. The Life Guardian blade flashed once before golden light circulated around the golden dragon sphere. However, this didn't take longer than an instant before the 2 items finished interacting. Seems like I can't forcefully fuse them together. At least, I don't have the ability to do so at this point. Huo Yuao shook his head exasperatedly. His eye of destiny flickered and reabsorbed the golden dragon sphere. Right at this moment, an idea struck him. If he didn't have the ability to fuse them together, could they fuse together through destiny within his eye of destiny? The eye of destiny contained the mystical power of destiny, and that was a power that not even the beast god, Tian, could understand. The beast god couldn't detect the Life Guardian blade's existence before this because it was contained within Huo Yuao's eye of destiny. Huo Yuao had stored and nourished both items in his eye of destiny separately before this, and he didn't try letting them interact with each other. What if he changed his methods? With that, Huo Yuao immediately reabsorbed the Life Guardian blade into his eye of destiny, and he controlled and shifted it so that it was placed in the same place as the golden dragon sphere. He didn't feel anything special. They were both under the influence of the power of destiny, but they were just sitting there calmly. They were no different from how they were on the outside. Huo Yuao wasn't worried, as he knew that good things only came to those who waited. For him, both items fusing together could possibly give him an unexpected surprise, while it would be nothing much for him even if those items didn't fuse. They were both Huo Yuao's trump cards on their own. Huo Yuao finished dealing with the 2 things that could almost be considered godly weapons, and his thoughts returned to his recollection of Tian's soul power. His body hadn't completely recovered recovered at this moment, but his spiritual power had almost completely recovered. Soul power also flourished in his body. Huo Yuan didn't dare to experiment within his body because he would be in big trouble if something went amiss. However, everything was different outside his body. Even though Huo Yuan knew that he should wait until his body had fully recovered before undergoing this experiment, he couldn't resist the temptation right now. His desire for power and strength became even stronger after facing off against Yi Shishui, and understanding and grasping the secret to Tian's soul power would undoubtedly be very helpful for his improvements in cultivation. Huo Yuan thought for a moment before he decided to begin his experiment. He was doing it externally anyway, and he wouldn't hurt himself as long as he controlled his soul power appropriately. He could stop his experiment the last time he attempted it inside his body, so he should have no problems outside his body. Huo Yuan assured himself before he immediately started his experiment. Huo Yuan raised his right hand, and a thread of soul power gradually appeared. The mysterious heaven technique soul power was presented as a faint white color. This was his purest soul power because it didn't interact with either of his martial souls. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.